Always, we are joined by our director, Eve Hussein, and our guest for this week is Sumeli, who is currently the Multicultural Community Connectors Coordinator for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Today, we'll be talking about the various strategies the NDIS has been using to implement their new program. If you're interested in learning more about how good communication practices can be used with multicultural audiences, don't forget to visit and subscribe to
Yeah, I think we are live, and I think something may have happened to Hasara, but we're here. Good morning, Sumeli. You represent today an organization that a lot of people are very familiar with. It's ECCV, or Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. So firstly, good morning to you, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for having me.
It's a wonderful opportunity to learn more about what you do as an organization, I guess, just a little bit, but also the project which you are heading, I guess, what I'd like you to tell us a bit more about, please.
Sure, no problem. Well, if you like, I'd like to acknowledge the country before I begin. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land and waters that I am on today, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in attendance today in this session. Yes, so I am from the Ethnic Community Council of Victoria. So if you like, I can give you a little bit of an intro on who we are, so the audience are a little bit aware. So the Ethnic Community Council of Victoria, ECCV, as we call it, is a peak member-based organisation in Victoria. So we consult with multicultural communities in order to advocate to all levels of government in areas like human rights, access, equity, in improving services. So ECCV was established in 1974 as an advocacy and policy agency for CULT communities, which are culturally linguistically diverse communities.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know you've been part of the organisation since September of last year, and you've come to take on a pretty big brief. Tell us, what is it that you do?
Okay, so ECCV is one of the funded receivers of the Multicultural NDIS Community Connectors program, which was funded through NDIA. So it's part of the National Community Connector program. So what the National Community Connector program is, it was developed by NDIA to support access to NDIS for 4 different cohorts groups, and those groups are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, which is the multicultural community, which we sit under, people experiencing psychosocial disabilities, mental illness, the ageing parents and carers of people with disabilities, so carers who are, seniors. So NDIA has recognised that these 4 cohorts weren't accessing the NDIS, and that they were facing additional barriers in accessing some of those government services. And in our case, which is the CULT community, some of those barriers is, cultural barriers. It could be language barriers, not knowing the services that are available in Australia, not having these services back in their own country, not having any disability services back in their own country in some countries. So that's why these four cohorts were developed. So our program, which is the Multicultural NDIS Community Connector program, is the program which sits under the CULT community. So we have ECCV has recruited 10 multilingual staff from the community. So when I say multilingual, some of our staff members speak more than 2 languages.
Right.
So those staff, the languages spoken by our community connectors are Arabic, Cantonese, Dinka, Mandarin, Greek, Somali, Swahili, Turkish, Urdu. I hope I haven't missed any. Eritrean.
Oh, okay.
So there's quite a combination, and Vietnamese, if I missed Vietnamese, Vietnamese as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
So
Many, sorry to interrupt you, but I remember the excitement. What was it, 2013 now, maybe, when the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard announced NDIS, and the wave of optimism and I guess hope for a lot of people, because all of a sudden people were in charge of their own destiny a little bit, if I can put it that way. And we know from what you said just now that the uptake with certain groups, cohorts has been quite low. So your job is really to try and improve that and also educate people. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, so when NDIS rolled out, or when it was announced, so it sort of from a medical model, it went into a social model. I mean, I think that's what they try to do, take that social model of disability, so that it meets the needs of the person with the disability rather than, so if you like, I can give you a little bit of an example of that.
Sure.
If a person with a disability who's in a wheelchair, if they're not able to walk up some steps to get into a building, then the way that person is looked at is, the view is that it's the person's physical disability is the issue, not the steps. So that's sort of a medical model, whereas a social model is, again, same person, wanting to get up those stairs to get into the building. The problem is the building.
Right.
There's no steps. There should be a ramp in the building so that the person with the disability has the same access as anybody else. So that's the social model. So it's sort of taken that social model aspect. If you get what I'm
I do. And it's such a simple yet effective way to explain how things should work, so that people don't feel, I guess, like a burden. But talk to us about the concept of disability itself. So some of the language, and we do translations, so we've been watching this kind of taking effect as we speak. But some of the language has changed. We know, we no longer call people disabled. We say people with disability. We talk about the stairs being a problem, not the person not being able to climb the stairs. Are you seeing that, particularly in the context of the 10 languages or cultural groups that you've mentioned, are you seeing that part of the education, taking root in the communities? Are people finally sort of slowly understanding, given that some, as you said, come from contexts where disability as a concept, as a construct, might not necessarily exist?
So I think look, amongst the CALD community and I think mainstream community as well, there's a huge stigma around disability, and there's a lot of programs that are in place, and there's lots of advocacy agencies as well as individuals who are doing a lot of work in that scope. Yes, disability, there's a huge stigma, and again, amongst some cultures there's a huge stigma, and some cultures don't even have a word for disability.
Right.
So trying to translate disability to them, you need to explain the term rather than explain it in a term rather than explain, do word by word translation. So if trying to explain to them that a person is not able to perform a task due to the limitation that they may have to whatever it is, rather than labeling, putting the word disability. It's because there's a huge stigma around it. Not only stigma, but there's no there's no words for it either. But I think our role with the multicultural NDIS program, the Community Connector program, is to inform the community, especially the coal community, because that's the area we're working in, inform the coal community of the services that are out there. You know, the NDIS is out there to support them, to help them navigate that system, to help them understand that that they're able to get support for their everyday living, so that they can perform their everyday living, that will help them with, you know, with their disability. So in some cases, you know, in some people we work with, we might not even use the word disability. So we you know, in the cases that are coming to us, we've had lots of cases where you know, parents with young children who are displaying signs of autism, or have been diagnosed, have diagnosis with autism, or have speech delay or intellectual delay, who don't understand the early childhood early intervention scheme in NDIS, and who need a lot of education, or not education, but who need a lot of information around what that is and what they do, their role, because they pretty much think they're in a government body and are afraid to even engage with them.
So that would be another barrier, I guess, where people just don't understand the system, where you know, things we take for granted, and you know, the mainstream education we've all had is something that maybe CALT communities haven't. So when you work with you know, someone from that community, so the advocacy work that you've mentioned, that's one thing that you do, but do you don't do any service provision? It's more about enabling service providers to do their job well. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're not a service provider. So we're not an NDIS registered service provider, or we don't do any therapeutic work with the people we support. Our role is mainly to help and inform the people we're working with about the supports that are available out there, and help them to navigate those systems, help them to access NDIS, help them to register with NDIS, help them to or assist them with collecting their evidence, you know, their medical evidence, going to their health professionals with them to collect that evidence, help them understand the forms that they need to complete, help them understand what a plan is, you know, how to prepare for their plan, who a local area coordinator is, who an early childhood early intervention team is, what's the function, what do they do, how can they support them, and build that trust with them, so that because we might not be, you know, our service or our support might not be there forever, but the local area coordinator and early childhood early intervention team will be there. So trying to build a relationship and trust between the community and the local area coordinators and early childhood early intervention team. So that's pretty much what our role is. It's just and that's why we're called the community connector. So we're connecting the community to NDIS supports. Yes, in some cases, in some circumstances, there will be individuals who might not be eligible for NDIS. So we don't just let them be. So again, with the local area coordinator, we help them, you know, we find other services and supports that may, in the community, that can help them as well.
And given that your staff are bilingual, so some of it would be done in language. I mean, obviously, they've been recruited because there are gaps, or there are niches of communities that need that support even more intensively than others. So what would a typical work, you know, day of at ECCV in this space look like? So other than, you know, connecting people with information, educating, and, you know, sort of holding people's hands, what else happens behind the scenes?
Sure. So if you like, I'll just tell you how, you know, who's eligible, because that's really important for the community to know. So to be eligible for NDIS, you have to be under the age of 65 years old.
Okay.
So 0 to 65. So 0 to 6 or 0 to 7 for early childhood early intervention. You don't need a diagnosis.
Okay.
So they can access, a child can access that. And then 7 to 65 is the age for eligibility. A person needs to have a permanent visa. So it could be an Australian citizen, permanent residence, holders of protection special category visa, and that alone is just huge. So I wouldn't be able to explain that to you right here, right now. But it could be spouse visa, it could be a refugee visa, and such as those. But it has to be permanent. So that's the eligibility. And to be eligible to our support from our connectors, we are working across 6 municipalities in Victoria, and they are Greater Shepparton, Hume, Moreland, Darebin, Whittlesea and Brimbank.
Okay.
There are other organisations who are also working in Victoria in the same scope. So AIMS is doing Dandenong and Casey. Diversitat is covering Melton and Wyndham. There's Migrant Information Centre who are covering Whitehorse and Monash. The Islamic Women's Association are covering Dandenong. So this is the Victorian services who are supporting Cole community. So Mary Healthy has the funding to cover the aging carers, and I think Co-Health might have the Co-Health might have the psychosocial. And about what are other things that our community connectors do?
Yes.
Okay, so they help people with disability and their carers and their parents to register with NDIS. So we've spoken about the NDIS. So they work with families to understand the NDIS better, or individuals or parents, families. So they look at their existing NDIS plan and see if they're getting the best possible support from their plan. Because it could be, Cole community, migrant community can misunderstand, not use the plan to its fullest, especially with COVID as well now. So we look at that and we try to explain how to best utilise their plan. We also link them with support services in their local community. If a child is like going into playgroup, joining a playgroup, joining a support group, getting, if they need a bit of parenting, getting them to call Child First for some parent, support with their parenting, linking them with their local area coordinators and early childhood early interventions. We also link the carers and their carers and their families with supports as well, because we know that sometimes looking after people with with a disability can be quite stressful and tiring. So the parents and families and carers may need some help as well. So linking them up with supports and linking again, like I said, linking them up with mainstream services. We also provide information sessions to community groups. So we have some targeted groups that we go into and provide a general NDIS information session. Following the information session, we will consult with that group and ask them, what other information would you like to hear and they may say, look, we want to know a little bit more about what is a plan and how to prepare for a plan. And then we would either join up with, partner up with the local area coordinator, or invite the local area coordinator to come along, to speak along, to speak about the plan. They might ask, what is medical evidence? How do you go about it? What do we do? How do we ask for that medical evidence? How do we go about collecting that medical evidence? So we may do another session with the community about their needs, what they want to hear rather than what we want to enforce. So that's what we do. We do a lot of presentations, community presentations. We will go into, where the community go, events. There might be an event, and we'll have a stall there and provide information to the community who are participating. So it's about community capacity building, empowering the community, taking control of their own supports, and understanding that they have choice and control, and there's supports out there, that they're not alone. There are help out there. You don't have to do this on your own. So there's a lot of promotion of that happening.
Right.
So that's what our and lots of phone calls to community groups. We've pretty much covered, in our 6 areas, covered all the community organizations, community leaders, spoke, had lots of conversations with them. And if we have missed any, please give us a call. We're happy to talk to you, because we do want to help those people who need help.
Right.
We understand that it's quite difficult. The NDIS language is quite difficult to understand for an English-speaking person, let alone someone from a cold background who's just newly arrived, who may not be illiterate in their own language.
Right.
So we understand that, and so our support to the people we work with is we understand their vulnerability and we understand their needs, and we have a cultural lens. So we do it from a cultural lens.
It's an amazing a lot of work behind the scenes, as you said, to try and make those connections and to reach out to the community in a sincere and genuine way, I guess. So it's not just sort of ticking boxes. I know that ECCV is there on the ground, speaking to people. But, so maybe you knew this question was going to come. What happened during COVID, though? How did you guys cope? Because I think, if you came on board in September, we were just coming out of lockdown. How have things been affected through the pandemic?
Okay, so before coming into this role, I was working as a case manager in family mental health, early intervention and mental health. So I had 6 months worth of experience in working in the COVID situation. So I had that 6-month experience, because we had to do a lot of our supports were online or over the phone. ECCV was fantastic in the way they put guidelines and things in place, and we've got a fantastic HR team so who are very much on top of everything, and communication within ECCV is fantastic as well. So it's very transparent, so the staff are all aware of what's happening. They're in the loop. So we all had to work from home. So maybe for the first month or two, we did not meet. No staff met each other face to face, because we all came on board during the restrictions. So we were all working from home. There was a lot of this ECCV provided everyone with the electronics, all the equipment that we needed, all the technology that we needed to do our work. Everything had to be done online, the setup, so there was a lot of online, there's a lot of learning how to do things online, and it was quite challenging. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, no, it wasn't challenging. It was challenging, and I think because it was a teamwork. I mean, there's 10 community connectors, and we've got 2 coordinators who are working in this program, and we worked as a team. We supported each other, and the management supported the coordinators to make this as successful as it is, because without that, I don't think it would have been as successful. The communication was one. There was we did a lot of, every morning we did catch-ups, morning catch-ups, we did afternoon catch-ups with all our staff, just checking on each other to see if they're doing okay, because self-care is really important as well. And if they needed any support, we did weekly staff meetings and PD trainings, so professional development There was lots of information circulating amongst our team, lots of information coming from management to us and then from us to our team. So it was pretty much a whole organization was working together to make sure that people were okay, number one. Secondly, that, you know, the work we needed to do, we had to work together and put our 12 heads together and see how we can make this successful, or how we can make this work, and not so much successful, but how can we make this work? So it was teamwork. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but it was quite challenging. It was challenging a lot, and I can't sort of move forward without saying this is that, you know, some, not all, but most CALD communities are very good on Facebook, on social media. They're not very good, you know, the ones that we've been working in, and I come from a CALD background myself, so I know that, you know, my mother's on Facebook.
Yes.
So yeah, she would not know how to use her email, but she's on Facebook. So emails weren't going to work with most of our, you know, some of our people we're working with. So how could we make this work? How, you know, so making phone calls rather than sending emails.
Right.
You know, we would send an email but follow up with phone calls. So we had to have strategies in place, guidelines in place. We had to create all those procedures, you know, some of the procedures, engagement tools. So everything had to be
sort of happen on the go, I guess.
Happen on the go, but there's a lot of investment put in, you know, creating those procedure guidelines. You know, how do you go about doing this? And if it doesn't work, what's plan A, plan B, what's plan C? So, yeah.
Sounds like a pretty resilient organization. So, Melly, we have time for one question because the last 26 minutes have gone very fast. So I'm going to hand over to Hasara for one question. It's been very, very interesting and enlightening, even. You know, thank you for taking us through not only how you work, but what happens to the community. That's really interesting. And you can see the passion that you have for your work and how basically you guys are changing people's lives one at a time and changing the conversation. That's really, really important. Hasara, can I hand over for questions?
Yeah, so we have a question here. I think you might have briefly touched on this before, but one question we have is, will the program change now that the restrictions have also changed? Will it still remain mainly focused online, or are you going to look to implement some more in-person sort of initiatives?
Yeah, so we are following the Department of Health and Human Services guidelines. So we are seeing people face-to-face, again, within the guidelines of DHHS. So, and yeah, if that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, it does. And I think, you know, the communities and everything's a little bit fragile, and we all are a little bit unsure of what to do. So it's good to know that organizations such as yours and you personally are out there to hold our hands, whether it's, you know, for our own needs, I guess, if there's a disability in our own network or family. But also in being able to break all this information down and present it in a sort of chunked way that it's easier to understand, especially when language or culture or whatever, or fear of authority is a barrier. And I think that's a real thing for a lot of people, because, you know, as resilient as we are, we have gone through a lot last year. And I think, you know, if programs are available and people aren't accessing them, then one way of addressing that is getting people there on the ground, you know, connecting, because it's really that's what it's all about, for people to understand. And also service providers. Just very, very quickly, we have 2 minutes. Do you work with service providers to try and educate them on some of the aspects you've talked about?
We don't. I don't want to call it educate, but we do inform them of cultural appropriate.
Right.
Yeah, and some of the barriers that they may be facing, and that they do send us referrals. So if they're working with a client who may need some support around connecting with NDIS, we get our referrals from them as well.
Well, that's good. So look, I will end the session by thanking you, Surmali, sincerely for your time, for allowing us to sort of peek behind the curtains to see what you do, but also to see your passion and dedication to the work. And well done and congratulations, I think, for having a great team that's working with real people and changing real people's lives. I think for me, that's the measure of success. I know there's a lot of challenges, struggles, we'll call them what you will, but I think as long as you have the right approach and methodology, which you've explained to us, and a program and a plan, then the communities will benefit. So thank you again.
Can I just thank you so much for having me? Can I just say one little thing?
Sure.
Some of our connectors have lived experience with disability themselves, so they actually understand the barriers. But we have, if people want to get more information or want to get in connect with our support, they can go on to Ethnic Community Council of Victoria's website and type in Community Connector. The information is there. We've got the referral form is there. If you like, I can send you my details where you can post it on there as well. We can send you the flyer if that's okay with you. And people, we accept self-referral, and we accept referral from services, organisations, community groups as well.
That's great.
And we're happy to come out and do a presentation to community groups as well. Sorry, I know you want to go.
No, not at all. Look, I could talk to you forever, because actually, speaking of education and information, I've learned so much from you today about, what happens and what it all means. And I think it is about spreading the word and letting people know that they're not alone. You've explained that so well. And that we're not talking about, I'll have that example that you've given us forever, for the rest of my life, that it's not about you that cannot walk up the stairs, it's about the stairs that you cannot walk up on, whatever.
That's the barrier. The stairs are the barrier.
That's it. The stairs are the barrier. So on that note, we'll thank you, Sumeli, very much for your time. And thank you, ECCV, for letting us borrow you for half an hour. And we will post all the information. If people want to find out more, ECCV's got a really good website. All that information is there. Thank you once again for joining us this morning. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.